The wind never really stops around the old house on Chestnut Lane. It doesn't howl, it whispers, as if the air itself remembers what the walls cannot forget. When Ruth Bennett arrived with her niece, she inherited more than just an ancestral estate. She stepped into a silence so thick, it breathed. The House That Would Not Die, 1970, was never meant to be a blockbuster. It aired on television for one night only as part of ABC's now mythic Movie of the Week series. And yet, it has lingered in cultural memory like a ghost trapped in static. Behind its low lighting, minimal score, and modest runtime lies a film far more ambitious than it had any right to be. A séance gone too deep. A voice that speaks from beyond the grave. A house that refuses to forget its sins. While most haunted house films scream, this one sighs, and the result is far more unsettling. Directed by John Llewellyn-Moxey, the film used practical effects, sound distortions, and relics from actual museums to evoke a dread that feels personal. Barbara Stanwyck, an icon of Hollywood's golden age, once said this was the most haunting role of her life. And not just because of the script. Some claim the shoot was marked by accidents. Others say one particular scene was pulled from a real-life event the producers refused to credit. But perhaps the strangest part? How much of the horror lies not in what's seen, but what's heard or not heard. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about the House That Would Not Die, uncovered in the order the nightmare unfolds. Fact: Yi, the house that was waiting for her. The film opens quietly, too quietly. Ruth Bennett and her niece Sarah arrive at the inherited colonial estate, its wooden beams sagging under time. Its silence too still to be innocent. The house doesn't creak like old homes do. It exhales, like it's been holding its breath for decades, waiting. This wasn't just set design. The opening scene was shot in a real 18th century home just outside Los Angeles, selected not for its look, but for its acoustics. The production team discovered that the walls of this house absorbed sound unnaturally, allowing them to capture dead air in a way that felt heavy, suffocating. The silence wasn't an absence, it was a presence. Stanwyck's entrance was deliberately underlit. According to a lighting assistant, the director wanted to erase her shadow in that first walkthrough scene. Why? Because Moxey believed the house itself should be the only thing casting a shadow. And here's where it gets stranger. A prop diary shown briefly in the first 10 minutes was not a prop at all. It was an actual Revolutionary War family journal, loaned by a local museum. After filming, the museum staff requested it be returned wearing gloves and never opened again. What kind of production chooses authentic, cursed objects to build tension? Was it an act of method, realism, or something the crew didn't fully understand? Fact #2. The dust that moved. Shortly after moving in, Sarah explores the upstairs hallways alone. The camera lingers on a closed door. The light shifts slightly, then dust falls from nowhere. No breeze, no ceiling crack, just a slow, deliberate curtain of dust, falling like a warning. This scene was not part of the original script. The crew noticed that one of the ceiling beams shed a fine gray powder every day, always around the same hour. Rather than clean it, Moxey ordered the scene rewritten to let the house speak for itself. What wasn't planned was the shape the dust formed as it fell. Observers on set claimed it spiraled downward like a noose. The practical effect required no CGI, just a still set, a natural collapse of silence, and one slow tracking shot. And it worked. According to test viewers, this scene produced more discomfort than any of the overt ghost effects later in the film. Interestingly, one of the assistant directors later revealed in an interview that the dust was tested and found to contain high levels of bone ash. Whether this was residue from the antique floorboards or a contamination from an old artifact in the attic, no one could confirm. The report was buried. The lab shut down a year later. Can a house truly rot from memory alone? Or was something someone trying to shake itself loose? Fact #3. The mirror that wouldn't reflect. In the guest bedroom, Sarah notices a peculiar antique mirror. It doesn't reflect her properly. Her movements are delayed. Her mouth moves, but the reflection doesn't speak. It's subtle, easy to miss. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. This was one of the most technically sophisticated illusions in the entire film, and it was done entirely without visual effects. The mirror was actually a pane of smoked glass, with an identical double standing behind it, mimicking Sarah's every move with a split-second delay. The actress and her double rehearsed the sequence for 5 days straight, using metronomes and breathing patterns to keep in sync. The effect: a subtle psychological dissonance that made the scene feel off-kilter, even if viewers couldn't say why. But here's the eerie part. In some takes, the reflection moved before Sarah did a fluke, supposedly. But those takes were erased, except for one reel, which never made it to post-production. According to an archivist, it was marked with a handwritten note, "Do not view alone." Why would a studio be afraid of a reel of film? Is there such a thing as an image that doesn't just show, but remembers? Fact #4. The neighbors who didn't knock. In most haunted house films, the tension builds from within. But in The House That Would Not Die, the first disturbance doesn't come from a slamming door, it comes from polite conversation. Ruth invites local historian Pat McDougal and his friend Stan to dinner, hoping to learn more about the home's origins. But the atmosphere turns dense, almost formal, as if they've arrived not to socialize, but to warn. What most viewers don't realize is that this dinner scene was filmed with a deliberate lighting mismatch. Ruth and Sarah were lit with a warm tone, while Pat and Stan were subtly underexposed, giving them a slightly funereal tint. The DP later admitted this was intentional, to make them feel like they'd already been claimed by the house. Even more unsettling is the fact that Pat's dialogue contains historical inconsistencies, dates that don't match known Revolutionary War events. Was this a script oversight? Some believe it was planted, a clue, a red herring, or perhaps a hint that Pat is not just a historian, but part of the story the house is trying to repeat. And in the original script draft, the dinner ended with a line that was cut from the final version. Pat was to say, "Some places remember better than others. This one, it never forgot." Why cut that? Was it too on the nose or too accurate? When a guest knows too much, who's really being haunted? Fact #5. The voice that slipped through. That night, a voice slips under the door. A whisper male, angry, incoherent. Sarah wakes, but no one's there. The window is shut. The radio is off. The sound fades into the walls, like it was never meant for ears. This moment marked the first electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. In the film and in the early 1970 seconds, it was largely unheard of in American media. Director John Llewellyn Moxey had read an obscure European psychology paper about audio imprints from trauma sites and pushed to include a soundscape that wasn't music, but memory. The whisper was created using a layered vocal track recorded backward, then reversed again, with slight digital corruption added a precursor to what horror directors like David Lynch would later adopt. Some production notes called the effect the breath of the house. Even the actors weren't told what the whisper said. It was added in post-production. Barbara Stanwyck reportedly refused to watch that scene with audio, saying it made her stomach turn. A crew member later transcribed the phrase as, "Bring her back, it's not done." Bring who back, and finish what? The mystery was never explained. And that was the point. Fact #6. The first time she wasn't herself. During a casual afternoon conversation, Sarah suddenly changes. Her posture stiffens, her voice drops. She recites a phrase in a dialect no one recognizes. The room turns cold. Then just as suddenly she's back. Confused, pale, not scared, just empty. This was the film's first full possession scene, and it wasn't in the original script. The change was written in only after the actress, Kitty Wynn, began improvising during rehearsal. Moxey was so disturbed by her spontaneous line delivery that he demanded the cameras start rolling immediately, even though lighting wasn't ready. The line she spoke, "He's under the stairs, where they laid him with the iron cross," wasn't in the script, and no one could remember where she'd heard it. Wynn later insisted she hadn't made it up. The moment was kept raw, no cuts, no reaction shots, just her voice, low and ancient. One sound engineer noted that the pitch fell below her natural register by 3 semitones. How? The camera captured the moment. The mic captured something else. Did she act, or did something speak through her? Fact #7. The séance that breached something. Every haunted house film has a moment when curiosity crosses a line. In this one, that moment is marked by candlelight, joined hands, and one soft-spoken medium who goes too deep. Ruth agrees to hold a séance with Pat and Stan present. It begins with the usual solemnity, eyes closed, whispers beckoning the beyond. But the room turns sharp, a table jolts, the candle flickers upward instead of out. Then Sarah begins to speak not as herself, but as Amanda, a name no one recognizes. This séance scene was shot in a single take, and the actress playing the medium reportedly entered a kind of trance state that disturbed the crew. Her lines were improvised, entirely none of the Latin phrases she muttered were in the script. Linguistic analysis later suggested she was speaking a blended dialect of Old English and Dutch, fitting the 18th century Dutch settlers mentioned in the film's lore. Even more chilling, during playback, the film's sound crew discovered a second voice layered beneath Sarah's, a male voice. It wasn't recorded on any channel they had used. Some believe it was a technical anomaly, others call it the voice under the room. The séance was supposed to be the film's emotional center. Instead, it became something else entirely. A breach. What exactly did they contact? Fact hashite. The chair that moved too early, midway through the séance, just before Sarah enters a trance, there's a brief second blink, and you'll miss it when a heavy dining chair slides half an inch on its own. Some call it a practical effect. Others aren't so sure. The script did not call for any physical movement at this point. Moxie later admitted that the chair misbehaved in 2 separate takes, moving before any stage cue or line delivery. At first, the crew assumed it was due to unbalanced legs or a tilted platform, but the floor was checked, leveled, sealed. On set, the chair was referred to as the crawler, a nickname born out of discomfort, not endearment. When asked about it during a 1978 interview, Moxie simply replied, "It moved when it shouldn't have, and we used that take." The most fascinating detail? In that same moment, the camera lens flickered not in the final film, but in the original negative. Light warped, briefly, across one frame. Some say haunted objects don't need a story, they just need to be seen. Fact #9, the line that erased the audio. Following the séance, Ruth and Pat review a tape recording of the session, hoping to find logical answers. Instead, the tape contains a section of pure silence, not static, not distortion. Just erasure. This detail unnerved many viewers, but what they didn't realize was that the audio erasure actually happened during editing. The magnetic tape used to record the scene was found to have been demagnetized in a narrow band, just at the moment when Sarah says, "He was sealed with iron." That was the law. The film's editor, Robert Watts, said in a rare interview that he'd never seen anything like it in his career. The rest of the reel was untouched. No power surge, no heat damage. Just one perfectly erased segment, about 5 seconds long. Even the backup mic failed to record it. In the final cut, Moxie chose not to dub over it. He let the silence stay. But here's what's even stranger. When bootleg VHS copies began circulating in the 80 seconds, some reported hearing a faint ticking clock during that silent section, a sound not present in any master copy. Was it technical failure, or a moment not meant to be replayed? Fact #0, the man who wasn't the same after the séance. Pat seems off. His tone softens, but his gaze sharpens. He becomes oddly protective of the house, brushing off Ruth's concerns, dismissing Sarah's episodes. He insists everything is explainable, though no one asked him to explain. According to the shooting schedule, scenes of Pat's behavioral shift were meant to unfold gradually, but actor Richard Egan began playing the change more aggressively than scripted. In interviews, he claimed this was artistic instinct. Yet, behind the scenes, several crew members noted that Egan began staying on set after hours alone, in costume, rehearsing lines that were no longer part of the shoot. In one rehearsal take, never aired, Egan delivers a monologue directly into the mirror, referencing a woman named Abigail who doesn't exist in the script. No one knows where the name came from. Moxie refused to comment when asked about it years later. The turning point is subtle. When Pat stands in front of the fireplace and says, "Some things return home when they're needed," that line was not in the original script. It was ad-libbed and left in. Did the role get under his skin? Or was something already waiting to speak through him? Fact #9, the trapdoor they weren't supposed to open. The most literal haunting in the film comes from the discovery of a concealed room beneath the floorboards. Uncovered after a late-night search reveals inconsistencies in the baseboard's age. When Ruth and Stan pry it open, the camera drops low, watching from below, as if something is waiting in the dark. The door opens not with a creak, but a shudder, as if the house is resisting. Here's the fact. The trapdoor was not part of the house used for the main shoot. It was a constructed set piece, built over what the studio claimed was unused basement space. But days into filming, a crew member broke through a portion of the set floor and found an actual sealed storage space underneath. Inside were antique toys, moldy newspapers, and one unmarked box. The contents of that box were never disclosed. The crew was told it was empty, but after that day, the set was never used again. All subsequent trapdoor scenes were shot on a soundstage replica. The original footage of the real trapdoor being opened? It's missing. Vault records show the reel was logged, then withdrawn, with no tracking number. So the question remains, what did they open on camera and why did it vanish? Fact Hasson 2. The dream that was too specific? Ruth begins to suffer recurring dreams. In them, she walks through the house, but everything is reversed. The stairwell leads down, not up. The portraits have no eyes. The whispers are in a language she doesn't know, but somehow understands. In the film, these dream sequences are short, almost symbolic. But in early drafts, they were pages long, depicting entire conversations between Ruth and an unseen male figure who calls her Eleanor. None of these scenes were filmed. Instead, the final dream scene shows Ruth discovering a windowless hallway where none exists. The twist? That hallway was never built. Barbara Stanwyck walks down a blank corridor that the crew swore did not exist on the set map. According to the set decorator, no such hallway had been planned or constructed. When asked about it in a 1981 panel, Stanwyck claimed the dream scene felt more real than any other part of the film. She paused, then added, "I don't think I was acting. Was it a dream, or did the house rewrite itself?" Fact Hasson 3. The scream that wasn't hers. Sarah's descent into possession doesn't explode, it corrodes. Her episodes become more frequent, her language stranger, and her gaze increasingly hollow. But the turning point comes when she screams during a confrontation with Ruth. The sound is raw, feral, and not hers. That scream, now infamous among cult horror fans, was not recorded by actress Kitty Wynn. According to the film's audio logs, the final version used a stock vocal effect from an archival sound library, but when journalists attempted to identify the exact source, they hit a dead end. The file didn't exist in any known library before 1970. A few production insiders claimed it wasn't stock at all. They said it came from an accidental field recording, picked up during a mic test near the prop room. The engineer who captured it refused to play the full version. He quit the production 2 days later. Stranger still, the frequency of the scream, when analyzed, falls between human and mechanical pitch. It registered no identifiable vocal pattern. Audio engineers described it as a synthetic distortion layered with breath. Why did Moxie use that particular sound? Was it for atmosphere? Or because it couldn't be replicated? And who or what did it belong to? Fact Hasson 4. The trial of fire that did nothing. In a last attempt to rid the house of its curse, the characters perform a cleansing ritual involving fire candles, salt, incantations. But nothing changes. In fact, things get worse. The ritual was staged based on actual 18th century exorcism rites, pulled from obscure theological texts. The screenwriter, Henry Farrell, had a personal collection of religious occult literature and insisted on accuracy. The Latin phrases used were real, not invented. But during filming, something strange happened. The flames in the candles burned blue, a sign traditionally associated with chemical interference or unexplainable presence. The studio fire marshal was called to inspect the set but found nothing abnormal. In the final cut, the scene appears uneventful. But the raw dailies showed a moment when the flames split in two, flickering in opposite directions. The footage was deemed unusable, visually corrupted. And once again, the camera that filmed it malfunctioned immediately afterward. Even within the world of fiction, the ritual fails. But outside the script, something also refused to be banished. Can a story built on invocation accidentally invoke? Fact Hasson 5. The missing doll. Near the climax of the film, a porcelain doll found in the hidden chamber is placed in the living room. It's not particularly emphasized, yet its presence is unnerving. Then, in the next scene, it's gone. No mention, no explanation. Fans assumed it was a continuity error, but according to the prop manager, the doll used on set was a real 19th century artifact loaned from a collector. Midway through production, it vanished. The crew assumed it had been misplaced and replaced it with a replica for background shots, but that replica wouldn't stay still. Every morning, it was found facing a different direction, even when locked away overnight. The original doll was never recovered. Insurance paperwork was filed, but the form included a handwritten note in red ink. Do not search further. No one owned up to writing it. After production wrapped, the collector reportedly withdrew all future loans to studios, citing irreversible interference. The doll was described as psychometrically active. In other words, capable of absorbing and emitting emotional energy. Was it just a prop? Or was it the most haunted object in the room? Fact Hasson 6. The bones that didn't belong. In the final act, Ruth and Stan uncover a sealed compartment behind a false wall. Inside, bone fragments, wrapped in deteriorated cloth, alongside rusted iron tools. The implication is clear: someone was hidden here, and hidden poorly. What viewers didn't know is that the bones shown on screen were not made of resin or plaster. The prop team sourced real animal bones from a biological supply company, chosen for their texture under low light. But when the shipment arrived, something was off. A forensic consultant later hired by the studio to verify the realism of the props noted that one jaw fragment appeared human, specifically adolescent. The production dismissed this as impossible, but the piece in question disappeared from the set a day later, before it could be re-examined. Barbara Stanwyck reportedly refused to touch the bones during rehearsal, insisting a stand-in be used for close-ups. She later described the smell as wrong, not old, fresh. The scene was filmed quickly, in near-total silence. The soundstage reportedly lost temperature during shooting, despite no change in exterior weather or AC control. So were the props too convincing, or were they never props at all? Fact Haitian 7. The power that failed once. During the climax shoot, in which Ruth confronts the full force of the haunting, something happened that was never part of the plan. The entire set lost power once, and only once. This wasn't just a flicker. Every bulb blew out simultaneously. Backup generators failed. Cameras died mid-roll. Even the red standby lights on the soundboard went dark. It lasted 73 seconds, then returned, all systems restored without manual reset. The studio electrician couldn't explain it. There was no overload, no surge recorded, no pattern. The incident occurred exactly at midnight, which some dismissed as coincidence. What makes it more unsettling is that only the séance set was affected. The other stages in the building, running entirely on the same circuit grid, remained powered. After the outage, one audio reel began producing high-frequency static on playback, only in the moment where Stan says, "She's still here." Moxie left the line in. Can a set absorb energy? Or did something simply not want to be seen that night? Fact Hasson 8. The line they weren't allowed to say. Originally, The House That Would Not Die included a final monologue by Ruth, summarizing what happened. But the script also contained a second ending, later cut, one that tied the haunting to a specific, real-life Revolutionary War atrocity. That scene had Ruth reading aloud from a letter found in the wall. The letter detailed a secret tribunal during the war, in which 3 young women were executed as traitors, not for espionage, but for practicing forbidden communion. The implication was witchcraft, but the date and names matched a real incident in Pennsylvania, long denied by official records. ABC demanded the scene be cut, citing potential historical misinterpretation. The footage was shot anyway, then shelved. To this day, no one outside the network has seen it. One editor described the deleted scene as too real, too angry, and too accurate for television. It's unclear whether the suppression was legal caution or part of a larger effort to keep the house's real legacy buried. And if a haunting is based on truth, at what point does fiction become too close to confession? Fact Hassan, the woman who didn't leave. After the bones are recovered and the haunting appears to subside, the characters return to some sense of calm. But it's not resolution, it's resignation. Ruth packs her things. The lighting softens. The score suggests closure. But one thing is never shown: her departure. In the original script, Ruth was meant to leave the house for good, driving away at sunrise, never looking back. But that scene was scrapped during final edits. Why? Because Barbara Stanwyck allegedly refused to film it. In an audio recording from the set, she can be heard saying, "She wouldn't go, not after what she knows. You don't walk away from something like this." Moxie agreed. Instead, the film ends with Ruth gazing out a window, expression unreadable. But according to the director, that moment was shot in a different location, not on the main set. No one remembers building that particular window frame. Set documentation lists the shot as unlogged. To this day, some fans believe the ending was changed to imply that Ruth was not freed, but claimed. That she didn't survive the haunting, she became part of it. Why else would the title be The House That Would Not Die, unless it had someone new to live through? Fact #20. The final shot that shouldn't exist. The film ends on a slow pull away from the house. It's subtle, silent. The wind rustles. Then if you watch closely, the front door creaks open by itself, even though no one is there. Viewers long dismissed this as a draft or accidental continuity, but the truth is more unsettling. The final exterior shot was stock footage, reused from an abandoned ABC pilot. That house wasn't even the same building used for interior scenes. Yet when the footage was reviewed during editing, the door opened anyway. The original stock reel, preserved in a studio vault, shows the house with the door firmly shut. The movement exists only in the version that aired. Editors insist they didn't alter it. The scene was too minor to warrant effects. There was no budget, no time, and no reason. Even the negative doesn't match the final broadcast copy. That version labeled TX4 Final Alt has no corresponding paperwork. No editor recalls cutting it. It's as if the house, fictional or not, decided to write its own ending. When a door opens after the story is told, is it inviting us back or warning us to stay away? Bonus fact: the tape that no one claimed, years after the film aired, a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel tape labeled House, backup audio divided by Do Not Use, was discovered in ABC's long-term storage archive in New York. There was no corresponding log sheet, no signature, no date. Just that one handwritten label in faded red ink. Out of curiosity, a technician played it. What he found was 17 minutes of raw audio, apparently from the séance scene, but it wasn't the same as the final cut. There were no actors' voices, no ambient noise, just a woman breathing slow, steady, ragged. Then a whisper, "You brought them here, now stay." The technician played it again, thinking it might be an editing joke, but each playback changed. The order of the breaths, the tone of the whisper. On the third try, there was no whisper at all, just the sound of wood creaking as if a chair were turning. The tape was removed from the archive, slated for digital transfer, and never seen again. When later asked about it, ABC's records department stated no such item was ever cataloged. So where did it come from? Some say it was part of an early experiment in fear-layered sound design. Others think it was an accidental capture, something real, seeping in during production or after. But one archivist who briefly reviewed the reel before it vanished claimed the handwriting on the label didn't match any staff at ABC. Instead, it matched the signature from a letter found in the film's deleted ending. Initials, AM, Amanda. Some hauntings fade with time. Others adapt. The House That Would Not Die may have been made for television, but it left behind questions that never aired, footage that disappeared, and voices that still haven't been traced. If you made it this far, you already know this wasn't just another ghost story. It was a closed-door invitation. Tell us, which fact unsettled you the most? And do you think something real followed them onto that set? We're listening.